If one day I leave first. Have you ever asked yourself that if one day you die, will the people you love still recognize you? If one day the person you love the most, the one who held you during your earliest years, the one who once held your hand in the crowd, if they leave first, could it be that somewhere beyond what the human mind can grasp, their soul still remembers you? We often believe in the sacred, unbreakable bond of family, blood ties, shared lineage, a flow of memories and love running deep. But what happens when the body dissolves, the name fades, and time is no longer a straight line? Does that love still cross the final boundary, death? Or does it all vanish into nothingness as if it never existed? Maybe you're watching this video in a quiet room. Maybe you've just returned from a funeral, or you still haven't dared to touch the belongings that carry the scent of someone you lost. Maybe you're still living each day with a hollow space no one can fill, yet no one truly understands. If so, maybe this video is meant for you, because there's one truth no one wants to face, but we all must walk through. Eventually, we will lose someone we love, and someday, we too will become the one who is mourned, whose picture is placed on the altar, whose name is spoken in past tense. Some choose to believe, after death, we return to our ancestors, reunited in another world. Some believe in reincarnation, that we'll come back again, but not as ourselves. Some believe death is the end, the absolute erasure of everything, a black void where no one remembers, loves, or waits for anyone. And then there are those who dare not believe anything, afraid of believing wrong, afraid that hoping might only lead to heartbreak. The truth is, every theory about death has its flaws, but what causes us the most pain isn't about being right or wrong. It's the question, if the ones I love are on the other side, do they still remember me? Stoicism doesn't promise us a heaven full of flowers, nor does it entirely deny the soul. This philosophy teaches us to look directly at what most dare not say out loud, that death is a necessary part of the order of the universe, that the passing of someone we love isn't about judgment, it's a reminder we are alive and we are loving within a limited time, and that very limit is what makes love so precious. It's what makes a hug, a family meal, a conversation, something sacred and irreplaceable. I once spoke with a man in his 50s on a rainy afternoon. He told me, "My mother passed away 5 years ago, but I still say, I'm home every time I walk through the door, even though no one answers, even though I know no one's there waiting anymore." That's what haunts us. Not that death came too soon, but that there were too many things we never got to say. It's not death itself we fear. It's the final silence it leaves behind. This video doesn't promise a clear answer, because no one truly knows what happens after we close our eyes for the last time. But we can still ask the questions, with honesty and compassion, not to satisfy our curiosity, but to help us live more deeply in the present. Because maybe the way we live today is the only language a loved one's soul can still hear from the other side. Have you ever felt something like that? That sometimes, in the middle of a busy day, you hear an old song, you see the shirt your father used to wear, or walk past a little shop your mother once stopped at, and suddenly your chest tightens. No one says anything. There's no voice from the other side, but you know that soul never really left. Maybe that is a kind of reunion, a way for love to quietly cross the boundaries of death. We don't need to rush to believe in heaven. We don't need to insist there's an afterlife. We just need to ask ourselves, if I had one last chance to meet my loved one, what would I say? And if that's still unsaid, then live as if every day You're writing the next line in that unfinished letter, because maybe a soul out there is still quietly listening. Death is not the end, but a question that remains unanswered. For thousands of years, humans have stood before death as if standing in a dense fog, a place where nothing is clearly seen, yet everyone feels its presence. It makes us afraid. It makes us curious. And sometimes, it completely changes the way we live. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. A loved one passes away, and from that moment on, everything around you seems to change its color. You look at family meals differently. You treasure the words left unsaid. You care less about trivial things and regret the silences that came at the wrong time. In some strange way, death brings the human part of us to life. But what haunts many people isn't just the death of someone they love. It's that lingering question, are they still out there somewhere? No one wants to believe that love, the very thing we spent our whole childhood and adult life building, could be erased by a single heartbeat stopping. And so, we create images to hold on to, a heaven where souls gather, a cycle of rebirth, where we return, though not as ourselves, or simply a place of light where memories still remain. We call it faith, but more deeply, it's the heart's resistance to absolute disappearance. Stoicism doesn't offer us a picture of heaven, nor does it promise that we will meet again in the same form. This philosophy does not try to cover uncertainty with comforting words. Instead, it asks a quiet and courageous question: what is real and what is imagined when we face death? Epictetus once said, "I am not afraid of death. I'm afraid of never having truly lived, so that when death comes, I would have regrets." It might sound cold, but it holds a quiet kind of healing truth, because if we live fully, then, even if our loved ones leave, they continue living through our actions, our choices, our growth. It's not reunion, it's continuation. I once met a young man in his early 30s. He had lost both his wife and daughter in a tragic accident. He told me, there were nights I couldn't sleep, just lying there, asking, "Where are you? Is someone holding our child and me? I'm still here living, but not knowing who I'm living for." And then, one day, while watering the old flower pots his wife used to care for, he thought, maybe I don't need to find them in another world. Maybe the way I live, the way I take care of what they once loved, that is how I continue this life, for the part they couldn't finish. Not everyone believes in the soul. Not everyone needs religion to move through grief. But there's one thing anyone who has lost someone will understand. Some people, after leaving our lives, become more present than ever before, not through their bodies, but through an invisible presence in every right choice we make, every moment of calm we hold on to, every quiet act of kindness, seen or unseen. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When someone dies, think of the good they left behind, and keep living in a way that those things are never forgotten." That, too, is a form of reunion, not through words, but by living in a way that honors them. And if there is a soul out there still watching over you, what would you want them to see? Someone broken by pain, or someone still walking quietly, but with strength, as a way of saying thank you? You don't need to forget them. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to live as if you are the one left behind to continue the dream they didn't get to finish. Death, though invisible, still leaves a crack in our souls. And sometimes, that very crack is where the light comes in. This video doesn't argue for or against life after death in a religious sense. It simply invites you to return to one question after everything: what part of love can never die? If you've ever truly loved someone, and they are now gone, believe this: something still remains. not their shape, not their voice, but the trace they left in your heart, a place no death can ever touch. Are our loved ones still watching over us from somewhere out there? It sounds like a mystical question, but in truth, it comes from a deeply human need, the need to stay connected, even when the other person is no longer here. Have you ever felt that way? When you're going through something painful, when you're lost, when you're tired and feel like giving up, and suddenly you notice something strange. A gentle breeze passes through, a ray of sunlight hits your face just right, or maybe it's just a dream where the person you lost smiles at you without saying a word. Some call it intuition, some say it's spiritual, but maybe it's simply the deeper layers of memory where love has never truly faded. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What is lost is not truly lost. It has only shifted form to continue its presence." We lose a father, but every time we stay calm in the middle of a storm, we realize that steadiness was something he passed down. We lose a mother, but every time we hug someone with warmth and no conditions, we feel that gentleness, that was how she once loved. We lose a life partner, but every time we clean the house, care for the little garden, or neatly fold the blanket in the morning, we know that quiet care is still there, as if they never left. Love, especially family, love doesn't always need physical presence. It lives in our habits, in words that still echo in our minds, in how we treat ourselves and others. Someone may be gone, but their influence continues to quietly guide us. And maybe that is what it means to be watched over, not through eyes, not through words, but through a presence you can't name, a presence that somehow keeps you from feeling alone. A friend of mine once wrote a letter to her father, who had passed. She included this line, "Dad, I don't know if you can really hear me, but every time I'm about to do something wrong, I wonder, if you could see me, would you be disappointed?" And that thought keeps me in check. That's a true story. No miracles, no voices from the beyond. Just one thing powerful enough to cross the boundary of death: unfinished love. Stoicism doesn't tell us to cling to the past. It teaches us how to let go, not to forget, but to look back with clarity. Letting go doesn't mean turning cold. It means accepting they are gone. But what they left behind still remains. Maybe it's a healthy habit, a strong way of thinking, a deep compassion we learned from how they once lived, and keeping those things alive is how we keep them with us. There's something paradoxical that people who've lost someone often say, "I never thought I could be this strong, but after they left, I had no choice but to become the version of myself they always believed I could be." We think we can't go on without them, but then time passes. And in the moments when we feel like falling apart, we still stand back up, even though no one's asking us to. That's not forgetting, that's transformation, turning sadness into strength, turning emptiness into awareness, turning, "I want to go back" into, "I will live fully today." Maybe you've asked yourself, if my loved one were still here, what would they want to see in me? The answer is often very simple. They would want you to live in peace, not torn apart, not bitter, not stuck in regret. Just live, fully, steadily, kindly, because sometimes the peace of the living is the very thing that lets the soul of the departed finally rest. You don't need to speak to spirits. You don't need to find answers in the mysterious corners of the unseen world. You just need to listen to your own heart in the quietest moments. Because maybe the soul of your loved one is still speaking to you, not with words, but in a way deeper than any language can express. The Little Girl and the Empty Chair at Christmas. This story took place in a small town in the northern United States. In an ordinary family just like any other, There was a mother, a father, and 2 twin daughters. That Christmas, only one little girl sat at the dinner table. The chair across from her was empty. The girl's name was Emma. She was only 8 years old. Her twin sister Grace had just passed away in a tragic accident on her way home from school. The house that once echoed with laughter fell silent for months. The mother no longer sang. The father no longer told his silly stories. Everything felt incomplete, as if the whole family was living in a room where light could no longer reach. But what people remember most was Emma's quiet habit. Every morning, she woke up early. She set the table, and she still put out 2 chairs just like before. One for herself, one for Grace. When her mother asked, "Why do you still set a place for your sister? She's not here anymore," Emma gently smiled. "I know, but I think if she's looking down and doesn't see her chair, she'll feel sad." The mother said nothing more. She left the chairs just as they were. And then Christmas came. The family had planned not to celebrate. No tree, no music, no cookies. But on the afternoon of the 24th of December, Emma said something that stopped the whole house. "If we don't have Christmas, Grace might think it's because she died, and that's why everyone is sad. She might feel guilty. We shouldn't make her feel worse, right, Mom?" The mother held Emma tight. No one said a word. But from that moment on, the first light in the house came back on. They decorated the tree. They baked cookies. They sat down together. They sang not because the sadness was gone, but because they didn't want sadness to erase what Grace once loved. That year, Christmas wasn't the same. It wasn't joyful like before, but it held something no other year had ever held. The invisible presence of a soul kept alive through love and remembrance. This story was later shared by the father at a gathering for parents who had lost children. He said, "I used to think my daughter's death was the end, but then I realized it was the way Emma lived after the loss that kept Grace's soul in our home, not through her shadow, but through her gentleness, through the soft light that comes from a heart that refuses to let love disappear." Maybe you too are living with an empty chair inside you, a loved one who's gone, a relationship once deep, now only a memory, a face you used to see every day now only appearing in dreams. The question is, will you let that chair gather dust, or will you keep it clean through gratitude? You don't have to keep everything the way it was. You don't have to deny the truth that they are no longer here, but you can choose not to close your heart, not to turn beautiful memories to stone, not to let sorrow erase the things that were meant to live on. Stoicism doesn't stop us from grieving. It simply reminds us pain doesn't have to take the shape of destruction. It can become a beginning if we let it push us to live more kindly, to love more consciously. Just like Emma, she didn't know philosophy. She never read Epictetus or Seneca, but she knew this. Love, when it is real, does not go silent just because someone is gone, and that might be deeper than any promise of heaven. If you're still holding a grief you haven't yet named, start with something small. Write a letter to the one who's gone. Say their name softly before you fall asleep. Clean a small item that holds a shared memory. Or simply live better as a quiet way to say thank you. Because sometimes it's these small acts that become the language a soul can still feel. Even if they can no longer hear, why does death hurt us? Even when we know it's inevitable. We all know that everyone will die someday, that our loved ones will leave, and eventually, so will we. It's no surprise. Nothing new. And yet, even knowing it all along, why does death still hurt so much? Why is it that losing just one person, just one, can cause your entire inner world to collapse? Why is it that in the most ordinary moments, passing by an old room, smelling the scent of a sweater someone used to wear. Grief rushes in like a crashing wave. Seneca once wrote, "We don't grieve because of death. We grieve because of what could have continued, but now never will." What truly hurts is not just the loss itself, but the emptiness left behind in all the things that were unfinished, the words never said, the hug postponed too long, the shared dream that never had the chance to begin. Those are the things that make loss so painful. We fear death because it's the one thing we cannot control in life, even in suffering. We feel we have some agency. We can try harder, fix our mistakes, start again. But with death, everything becomes final. No second chances, no way back, no chance to say it better. And it is this absolute helplessness that breaks people down. Stoicism does not deny the pain of loss. It simply asks a different question. Amid everything we cannot change, what do we still have power over? Epictetus once said, "We cannot control when our loved ones die, but we can control how we respond to it." You can choose to collapse, let the pain consume you, or you can choose to live the rest of your life in a way that honors the love they once gave you. You don't have to be strong right away. You don't have to pretend you're okay. But you must remember, pain is a natural response. Destroying yourself is a choice. They often believe the deeper the attachment, the deeper the grief, and because of that, some choose to guard their emotions. They avoid loving deeply, avoid trusting fully, avoid bonding too much. But the truth is, we cannot stop ourselves from loving because love, especially family love, isn't a project to measure in gain or loss. It is part of our soul's structure, and that's why when we lose it, it tears a hole nothing else can fill. But Stoicism doesn't stop at accepting pain. It goes further. It transforms pain into the fuel for living. Seneca wrote, "When someone dies, let grief teach us how to live more wisely, not how to fall apart." You don't need to rush to heal. You don't need to force yourself to move on. You only need to look at the wound without turning away, because from there, you will see what truly matters. You'll pause to say, "I love you," while you still can. You'll stop letting small distractions steal the time to call someone back. You'll start living as if every day could be your last. Death, to the Stoic, is the greatest teacher, not because it gives us knowledge, but because it forces us to reflect on what truly has value. When facing the death of someone we love, we no longer want to talk about status, wealth, or reputation. We're left with only one question: was I truly present, truly loving, truly alive, truly here? And if the answer is yes, then the pain of loss, while still there, will no longer haunt you endlessly. And if you are in the middle of that grief, if there is still an empty chair in your heart, if you still wish you could say one last thing to the one you lost, then begin with one decision. Live the rest of your life as if you're living for both of you. It doesn't need to be grand, just sincere, steady, and present in every small moment. Because maybe the quiet strength you're building right now is the clearest message you can send to the other side. I'm still here, and I'm living the way you once hoped I would. Not everyone who leaves truly disappears. We've talked about so much today, about empty chairs, about souls that are no longer present, but still deeply felt, about unfinished dreams that the departed never got to complete. But perhaps all of it can be summed up in one quiet question. If our loved one were still here, how would they want us to live? Not a life drowned in mourning, not a half-alive existence, not a desperate attempt to forget, but a life that is more grounded, more gentle, more grateful. You can go back to any moment in your life, a simple one, An afternoon when your mother made soup. A morning when your father quietly wheeled your bike out. The laugh of a sibling echoing in the hallway, or the proud look of someone you love, watching you overcome something difficult. These little moments once overlooked are what hurt the most once they're gone, because in the end, we don't grieve the big things, we grieve the ordinary things, the ones that will never happen again. Stoicism does not teach us to be emotionless. It teaches this: when viewed through wisdom, emotions cease to be chains and become levers. Missing someone is not wrong. Feeling pain is perfectly natural, but you can choose how you remember, how you grieve, how you move forward. No one is asking you to forget. No one is forcing you to pretend you're okay. But you can little by little turn memory into a source of life. Sometimes we think, as long as we're still hurting, still grieving, it means we're still remembering them. But have you ever flipped that thought? What if it's through living more deeply that we truly keep them close? Not through tears, but through continuation. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, life is not measured by years, but by the depth of presence we leave in the hearts of others. And you, through the way you live, can turn a soul that has left into something fully alive. In the present, we cannot go back to change what was, but we can live the rest of our life in a way that gives meaning to what once was. One person has passed, a bond has ended on this earth. But if from that loss you become someone more loving, more aware of every passing moment, more kind to those around you, then that death was not in vain. You don't need to find a mystical gateway to see them again. You don't have to wait for a dream to say your final words. You only need to live as a form of response, a response to what they gave you, a response to what they didn't get to finish, a response to life itself, while you're still here. Because you know what? The fact that you're still here means you still have a choice: to live with gratitude, to walk forward in stillness, to turn grief into a hyphen instead of a full stop. And if there's one thing a departed soul could send you from wherever they are, I don't believe it would be sorrow, not a cry of regret, but a soft whisper, calm and full of peace. Keep living, and live beautifully, because once we loved each other with all our hearts, if there's truly a place after death, how will we recognize one another? Perhaps not by faces, not by names, not even by the familiar greetings we once knew. Perhaps we will recognize each other by the silent gaze of a soul that still remembers an unspoken word, still carries a love left unfinished. Perhaps we won't call each other mom, dad, brother, or sister, but through a language without sound, where simply touching the familiar frequency brings all the memories back. Have you ever thought that maybe, somewhere far away, someone you once loved is still watching over you, not to control, but just to know that you're okay? And if today you find yourself sitting here in a quiet room, in that familiar chair, while the world keeps spinning, with a heart that hasn't fully healed, then know this: you are not alone. You've just spent nearly 60 minutes, not to seek a perfect answer, not to know for certain whether we'll meet again in another realm, not to find something new, but to listen inwardly. Maybe you're thinking of someone you can no longer call, no longer hold, no longer say, I love you, or I miss you too. Maybe you've been carrying a wound that no one else can see. If that's the case, I just want to say one thing: you are braver than you think. You didn't collapse. Even when you wanted to give up, you kept on living, even when no one demanded it. You got back up, even when the hand that once held yours was no longer there. And that is not something everyone can do. The truth is, no one ever truly gets over the loss of someone they love. We simply learn to live with it, like a scar no longer bleeding, but never truly gone. And from that scar, our hearts begin to soften, our minds begin to understand compassion, and love begins to take on a new form. Stoicism doesn't teach us to forget those who've passed. It simply reminds us, don't let their death be the reason your own life fades away. If they once loved you, they surely wouldn't want you to stay in sorrow forever. They'd want you to live, not just for yourself, but for the part of them they left behind in you. And if there is a soul somewhere, closer than you think, then maybe you don't have to meet again to be close. You just have to sit still, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and say within, "Thank you. I will continue living in the way you once hoped I would." You've made it through almost the entire journey. And if these words have touched you, it's not because of the script, not because the logic was right, but because there was once someone in your life who truly mattered. Someone who, no matter how many years have passed, at the mere mention of their name, your heart still softens. If you're still here, I'm glad for you. Not because you've found the answer, but because you still care enough to ask the question. That's the mark of a heart still alive. And you should know, the world needs more hearts like that. If fate allows, we'll meet again, in a quiet afternoon, in another video, or perhaps in that still moment when you pause and ask yourself, am I truly living in a way that honors the one I've lost? Some things never die. If we still remember how to love, when you first began this video, you carried with you a single question. Will we still recognize one another after death? Now, after nearly an hour of listening, you may still not have a definite answer, and that, in itself, is a very good thing, because the purpose of this video was never to give you a conclusion, but to open a door within you, a door that leads back to something you once knew, but may have forgotten. That true connection is never bound by physical presence, but by what continues, from one person to another, from one life to the next. If you ask me, so, after death, will we ever meet again? I'll answer you, with the honesty of someone who lives by Stoic philosophy. I don't know, and I don't need to know for sure. What matters more to me is this: in this very life, have I lived deeply enough to be worthy of the presence of those I've loved? Because sometimes reunion doesn't lie in the future, beyond death. It lies in the present, in the memories you keep, the actions you take, and every breath you take to live more fully. Stoic philosophy does not promise a radiant afterlife, nor does it deny the possibility of a spiritual world. It simply teaches this: if something is true, it must be lived in the present, and if it's not, then this moment here and now is the most sacred gift the universe has ever given. So, if you've lost your mother, cook the dish she once made. If you've lost your father, live by the principles he once held dear. If you've lost your lover, care for yourself the way they once reminded you to. And if you've lost a child, keep growing, even when it hurts. In doing so, they never really left. I can't promise you that we'll all meet again after death, but I know this for certain. When you live with awareness, with gratitude, with unconditional love, you will never truly feel alone. Not because someone is watching you from afar, but because within you, a part of them is still alive, a part still breathing through the rhythm of your own life. If you've made it this far into the video, then perhaps within you, like within me, there is a seed of stillness, a seed that is quiet, unassuming, asking for nothing, but strong enough to keep you steady through life's inevitable losses. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are simply walking through what every deep heart must one day pass. Learning how to hold on to someone, not with your hands, but with your heart, And if these words, these images, these quiet moments have stayed with you longer than just a few minutes, then maybe you are ready for the next part of the journey. Letting go is not losing. It is how the soul grows up. That will be the next chapter on LABE Stoic. If fate allows, we'll meet again in a quiet afternoon, inside another video, or simply in a deep breath you finally allow just for yourself.